Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. The World War II is over. The world is still scarred, still healing from 6 years of blood and fire. But in the winter of 1947, a single man boards a plane and sets off toward the most desolate place on Earth, Antarctica. His name is Admiral Richard Evelyn Byrd. To the public, he was a hero, the man who flew over both the North and South Poles, a pioneer of aviation, a decorated naval officer. Newspapers called him the last great explorer. But to the U.S. military, Byrd was something else. A man they trusted with secrets. Secrets too heavy for the ordinary soldier. That winter, Byrd led Operation Highjump, officially described as a research expedition. But it wasn't just scientists and cameras he brought with him. No. He commanded an entire fleet. 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men. For a so-called research mission, it looked more like an invasion. And then the whispers began. In South American newspapers, stories appeared of Byrd seeing flying objects that could move from pole to pole in moments. In the United States, rumors spread of a secret diary, written by Byrd himself, where he described entering a land beyond the ice, lush with green valleys, and encountering technology far beyond anything seen in 1947. The government said nothing. The reports disappeared, and Admiral Byrd died in silence. But the diary surfaced decades later. Tonight, we're going to follow Byrd's flight into the unknown. We'll read the words he allegedly left behind. We'll trace the newspaper articles that reported his warnings. And we'll ask the question governments never wanted us to ask. What did Admiral Byrd really see beyond the ice? This is Fact Up. And before we begin, tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Who knows, your hometown might be hiding a story dark enough to become the next Fact Up episode. Long before his name was whispered in connection with Antarctica's secrets, Richard Evelyn Byrd was a child of Virginia, born in 1888. From the very beginning, he seemed destined for more than an ordinary life. As a boy, he dreamed not of streets or cities, but of skies and oceans. And those dreams carried him into the United States Navy. By the time World War I erupted, Byrd was already making a name for himself as a daring young pilot. Aviation was still in its infancy, dangerous and unpredictable, but Byrd thrived in the cockpit. He wasn't just a soldier, he was a pioneer. His brilliance in navigation earned him respect from superiors and medals from his country. Then came the polar expeditions. In 1926, Byrd claimed to be the first man to fly over the North Pole. That alone would have secured his place in history. But 3 years later, he led an expedition to Antarctica, setting up the first of his famous Little America bases. These weren't just symbolic flights. They were feats of endurance, courage, and skill. By the 1930s, the American press adored him. The New York Times called him the greatest explorer since Columbus. But what truly set Byrd apart was his trust with secrets. During World War II, when America needed men to handle sensitive missions, Byrd was chosen. He didn't just explore, he served in intelligence, working quietly in the shadows. So by the time 1946 arrived, Richard Byrd wasn't just a celebrity. He was one of the most trusted men in the United States military. A man who had medals, records, and the respect of presidents. A man who could keep his mouth shut. Which is why, when the U.S. Navy launched Operation Highjump, an expedition to Antarctica so massive it dwarfed any before it, Byrd was put in charge. And if you believe the official reports, it was all about science. But if you look closer, the story becomes far more disturbing. December 1946. The war was over, but the world was far from peaceful. The United States and the Soviet Union were circling each other like predators, each waiting for the other to make the first mistake. In this uneasy atmosphere, the U.S. Navy launched a mission so ambitious, so massive, that it raised questions from the very beginning. They called it Operation Highjump. Officially, it was just scientific research, an expedition to Antarctica to test men and equipment in extreme conditions. That's what the public was told. But here's the disturbing truth. This so-called research mission involved 13 ships, 23 aircraft, and 4,700 men. A military armada disguised as science. For comparison, most scientific expeditions to the Antarctic had used a handful of vessels. Highjump was closer to a wartime fleet. Why so much firepower? Why so many troops for a land of ice and snow? Even stranger, the mission was cut short. It was supposed to last 6 months. Instead, it ended in just 8 weeks. The official reason? Harsh weather. But in Byrd's own words, reported by a Chilean newspaper, El Mercurio, something else happened. After returning from Antarctica, Admiral Byrd allegedly warned that the United States should prepare for the possibility of enemy planes coming from the polar regions, capable of flying from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Those weren't the words of a scientist talking about penguins. Those were the words of a military man who had seen something in the ice that he couldn't explain. And the rumors grew louder. Some said Highjump had been sent to eliminate a hidden Nazi base in Antarctica, a base where advanced German technology had been stashed at the end of the war. Others whispered that Byrd and his fleet had encountered something far beyond human technology. The US government released almost nothing. The details of Highjump were buried in classified reports. And Byrd? He said very little, at least in public. But in private, he may have written everything down. In a diary that would surface decades later, a diary that described a flight beyond the ice, into a world no one was supposed to know about. February 1947. Admiral Byrd takes off in a ski-equipped aircraft for what was supposed to be a standard reconnaissance flight over the Antarctic ice. The weather was clear, the instruments steady, the men back at base expecting a routine check-in. But in his private journal, the one that would not be seen until decades later, Byrd described something no routine flight should ever encounter. At first, he noticed the ice below thinning, strange patterns forming on the snow, unlike anything he had seen in years of polar exploration. Then green. Not ice, not snow, but stretches of green valley opening in the middle of Antarctica. Byrd wrote of temperatures rising, of rivers cutting through the land, of mammoth-like creatures grazing in the distance. And then came the craft, silent, disc-shaped, moving with impossible speed. They didn't attack. They escorted. 2 of them, flanking his plane, guiding him like a child being led by the hand. His instruments, he wrote, failed completely, compass spinning, radio dead. His controls no longer his own. He claimed his aircraft was pulled down gently into a city of shimmering light. The air was warm, the structures unlike anything he'd seen before. And waiting for him were beings, human-like, but taller, radiating calm. Byrd's alleged diary describes a meeting. The beings told him humanity was on a dangerous path, nuclear weapons, endless wars, arrogance that would destroy the Earth. They called themselves the protectors of the inner world, and they warned him, mankind was not ready. After the meeting, Byrd was escorted back to his plane. The controls returned. The craft released him and he flew back to base. No record of the event was filed in the official Operation Highjump reports. But in his diary he made one chilling note. The secrecy is ordered. I am reminded that I am a military man, and I must obey orders. If the diary is authentic, it means Byrd witnessed something extraordinary, and was silenced by his own government. If it is a fabrication, then the question becomes, who wrote it and why? Either way, the words attributed to Admiral Byrd still echo today. Because sometimes, the most frightening discoveries are not in space, but beneath our own feet. Decades passed. Admiral Richard Byrd died in 1957, a hero to many, a mystery to some. Publicly, his life was a story of daring expeditions, medals, and polar achievements. Privately, there were whispers. Among those whispers was a diary, not published in newspapers, not included in military archives, but handed down to his family. According to multiple sources, Byrd entrusted it to his daughter, instructing her to guard it carefully. The document allegedly contained details of his flights, the strange phenomena over the ice, and warnings about the world he had glimpsed. His daughter, in later interviews, refused to release the diary to the press, but she spoke in measured tones about the content, confirming only what could not be denied. Byrd had reported things that could not be explained by conventional science. The The expedition had witnessed objects and phenomena the official records omitted. He had believed the knowledge was too dangerous to be shared with the public. Journalists who investigated found corroboration in newspaper articles from the 1940s, including the Chilean El Mercurio, which reported Byrd's warnings about enemy planes from the poles, words too specific to dismiss as invention. Byrd's alleged diary, whether entirely factual or partly symbolic, paints a picture of a man caught between duty and discovery, a man who saw what no ordinary human was meant to see and chose to obey the secrecy demanded of him. The chilling thought remains. For decades, one of history's most credible explorers may have carried knowledge that the rest of the world was never ready to hear. And here's the part that connects us, the viewers, to this story. The diary reminds us that history is full of secrets, sometimes right in plain sight. Sometimes the terrifying truth is only a page away. Even while Admiral Byrd returned from Antarctica, questions lingered. Why was Operation Highjump cut short? Why did newspapers in Chile and Argentina report his warnings of unknown aircraft from the poles? And why has the U.S. government classified so much of the expedition's records? Over the decades, these questions fueled speculation. One of the most enduring ideas was the hollow Earth theory. Not the fanciful stories of sci-fi, but a theory discussed by explorers and some scientists in the early 20th century, suggesting that large cavities exist beneath the polar ice, potentially containing ecosystems unknown to modern humanity. Byrd himself never publicly endorsed such theories, but the diary, if authentic, hints at regions of the Antarctic that were green, warm, and inhabited. Another theory involves secret Nazi Antarctic bases. Historians confirm that Germany sent expeditions to Antarctica in the 1930s, mapping the region and establishing temporary stations. While the official story is that these bases were abandoned or destroyed, conspiracy researchers have noted that some of Byrd's observations, like unusual radio signals or unexplained craft, could correlate with these remnants of wartime technology. There is also the argument about military suppression of information. Byrd's own warnings in Chilean newspapers were framed as speculative by U.S. officials, yet his prominence and credibility made them difficult to ignore. Some suggest that the combination of unexplained phenomena, advanced technology sightings, and his private diary prompted intentional secrecy. What we can confirm, Byrd's flights were real. Operation Highjump deployed thousands of men, ships, and aircraft to Antarctica. Chilean and U.S. newspapers reported unusual observations and warnings by Byrd. Some military documents remain classified even today, fueling questions about what was really discovered. Admiral Richard Byrd returned from Antarctica a hero, yet he carried secrets no metal could honor. His diary, his warnings, and the whispers of phenomena beyond the ice remain tantalizing fragments of a story the world may never fully understand. Was there truly a hidden land beneath the ice? Did he encounter technology and civilizations beyond our understanding? We may never know for certain, but the lesson is clear. History is not always what it seems. Some discoveries are too dangerous to be told, some warnings too urgent to be ignored. As we close tonight's journey, remember, the world is full of hidden corners. Every mountain, every forest, every frozen wasteland may hide truths waiting for someone brave enough to look. And sometimes those truths are closer than you think, maybe even in your own backyard. Before we leave, we want to hear from you. Wherever you're listening from, drop it in the comments. Who knows, your hometown could be hiding a chilling fact-up story waiting to be uncovered, and maybe we'll tell it next. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Byrd's mysterious flight, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, because Fact Up is just getting started, and there are more dark truths to explore.